So now we are going to start our new topic, that is 5.3, diffusion. Okay. So in our previous classes, we have said about the transportation of, sorry, not transportation, we have talked about plasma membrane and all these things. Now we are going to start diffusion. Okay. So 5.3,
Yeah.
diffusion. The exchange of substances between cell and their environment, or between the membrane-bound compartments within cell and the cell systole, is defined as either active or a passive. Okay. So whatever the exchange is there in between the cells and the environment, which are the cells which are membrane bounded, or maybe you can see the cells which are membrane bounded, the compartments within the cell, the systole, are defined as the active or the passive one. Active means requiring metabolic activity, or the passive which do not require metabolic activity. All the movement requires some energy. Now, passive movement, however, utilizes energy from the natural motion of the particles. A passive movement that requires energy utilizes energy from the natural motion of the particles rather than the energy from another source. This topic we will focus on passive transport methods. So in this topic, we are going to focus on those transport methods in which utilizes energy from the natural motion of the particles. Clear? This is known as passive
Yeah.
movement. Okay. Now, diffusion. Diffusion simply means movement of particles. Now, diffusion is the net or overall movement of particles, and those particles can be atom, molecules, ions, from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. From a region of higher concentration to lower concentration, that is what diffusion. It is a passive process and it will continue until there is a concentration equilibrium between two areas. Okay. Now, this diffusion is because of the concentration difference. It will always go from higher to lower part. Okay. Now, it will flow until and unless that the both will reach to up to a certain equilibrium. So it is a passive process and it will continue until there is a concentration equilibrium. Now, if the concentration of both the places are same, then there will be no diffusion. Okay. Equilibrium means balance or no difference in the concentration. Now, diffusion happens because the particles in a gas or a liquid have kinetic energy, that is, they are in habit of moving here and there. And these particles and these movement is random, and an unequal distribution of particles will eventually become an equal distribution. Equilibrium does not mean the particle will stop moving, just that the movement are equal in both directions. Now, diffusion, now what happens and why, what is the reason behind the diffusion? So suppose your mom is cooking food in kitchen, fine. Now at that, in the kitchen, if she is cooking some food, the particles,
Yeah.
a specific type of particles are more, okay? Now these particles will move from kitchen to the living room, and you can smell that today mom is cooking something good or something bad, okay? Fine. So this movement is random and unequal. Now, whenever these gas particles are there, they can move here and there randomly. And it cannot be defined that it will move like this only. So it is a random movement. And distribution of particle is also unequal. And when this diffusion happens, the distribution of particles will eventually become an equal distribution. And hence, we have a diffusion. Now, up to which time the diffusion will occur? The diffusion will happen, or it will, you can say, continue until and unless equilibrium is reached, or which means that there is no further, you can say, difference in the concentration of the particles. Just that the movements are equal in both the directions. That is, the particles are moving from here and there. Okay, is that point clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now particles move at high speed and are constantly colliding. So these particles are moving here and there and they collide with each other, which slows down the overall movement, and hence the overall movement of the particles slows down. This means that over short distances, diffusion is fast, but as diffusion distance increases, the rate of diffusion slows down because more collisions have taken place. So again repeating, particles move at very high speed and are constantly colliding, which slows down their overall movement. Now, as the particles are moving here and there, they collide with each other, and hence their speed will slow down, which means that over a short distance, diffusion is fast. If a distance is very, very short, there will be more diffusion because there will be less collision, and less collision means less slowness of the particles. But as the diffusion distance increases, the rate of diffusion slows down. As the distance increases, the rate of diffusion decreases because collision is more, and more the collision means more slowdown of the movement. Clear?
Yeah.
For these reasons, cells are generally microscopic in nature. That is why cells are microscopic in nature, so that they can diffuse the things easily. The movement of particles within the cell depends upon diffusion, and a large cell would lead to slow rate of diffusion. If cell is large, then it will be a slow rate of diffusion. That is why in a human body, we can't depend upon diffusion only. We require so many other methods for transportation. The reactions would not get the substrates they need quickly enough, or ATP would be supplied too slowly to energy requiring process. Now, it can also happen that whatever the reactions are there, they are slow, and the ATP, which is going to provide some energy, is supplied, you can say, ATP would be supplied too slowly to the energy requirement processes. That can be the cause, that can be the thing which leads to the, you can say, on which the diffusion depends. Is that clear? Any doubt in this one?
No.
Okay, now next one. Factors affecting rate of diffusion. The first one is temperature. Higher the temperature, higher will be the rate of diffusion because the kinetic energy will increase. Because the particles have high kinetic energy, and as more kinetic energy means more movement is there. Concentration difference. Greater the concentration difference between the two regions, the faster is the rate of diffusion because the overall movement from higher concentration to lower concentration will be larger. Clear?
Yeah.
Next, the concentration difference is said to be a concentration gradient. So concentration gradient means the difference between the two concentration, that is from where the gas is moving and up to which it is going. Concentration gradient, which goes from high to low concentration. Diffusion takes place down a concentration gradient. It takes a lot more energy to move substances up a concentration gradient. Do I need to repeat it again? Diffusion takes place down a concentration gradient. As the concentration gradient is down, diffusion will be less. It takes a lot energy to move substances up a concentration gradient. From low to up, it is very difficult. From up to down, it is easy. So far, diffusion in the absence of a barrier or membrane has been considered. This is simple diffusion. So in this case, there is no barrier, no you can say membrane is required, and the simply motion in and out of the gases is there, which is known as simple diffusion. Clear?
Yeah.
This activity you covered, rate of diffusion in surface area.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Now diffusion across membrane. Diffusion across membranes involves particles passing through the phospholipid layer. Now, it can only happen if membrane is permeable to the particles. Non-polar molecules such as hydrogen diffuses freely down a concentration gradient. Now, what it is saying, diffusion or across membrane involves particles passing through a phospholipid layer. Now, diffusion means that is the particles are moving across a phospholipid layer. Now, it can only happen if membrane is permeable to the particles. If the size of the particle is bigger, then only it will transfer, otherwise it will not transfer. Okay, it can only happen if the membrane is permeable to the particles, non-polar particles such as oxygen. Okay, now diffuse freely down the concentration gradient, and then this oxygen and um, other things are diffused freely down to a concentration gradient, so that the concentration gradient is created. Here,
Yeah.
okay. Now, the hydrophobic interior of the membrane repels substances with a positive or negative charge ion. The hydrophobic interior of a membrane repels substances with a positive and negative ion so that they cannot easily pass through. Okay. So in the case of membrane, there is a hydrophobic part, hydrophilic part. So hydrophobic interior of the membrane repels the substances with the positive or the negative charge, that is ion, so that they cannot easily pass through the membrane. Now, polar molecules such as water with partially positive and negative charges can diffuse through membrane, but only at a very small rate. It can be done only at a very small rate. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, now small polar molecules pass through more easily than the larger ones. Small polar molecules pass through more easily than the larger one. Membranes are therefore described as partially permeable. So small, you can say molecules can pass through easily rather than the larger ones, and that's why those membranes are therefore known as partially permeable membranes. Clear?
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we see the rate at which molecules or ions diffuses across membrane is affected by surface area. The rate at which molecules or ion diffuses across membrane is affected by surface area. Larger the surface area of an exchange surface, the higher the rate of diffusion. Clear?
Yeah.
Larger the area of an exchange surface, the higher the rate of diffusion. Thickness of membrane, the thinner the exchange surface, the higher the rate of diffusion. The thinner the exchange surface, if the exchange surface is very, very thin, then the rate of diffusion is very high. Clear?
So the membrane needs to be thinner
Yes. So it means
for
a
the
large
high
and
rate.
thin membrane, a large and thin membrane is good for diffusion.
Okay. Yeah.
Clear?
Yeah.
Like this. This is the passive diffusion of oxygen into the cell of the cornea. Eye cornea, how it can
So it
happen?
goes from high concentration of oxygen to low
Yes.
concentration through
The
the.
high concentration of oxygen in the air and the high concentration of oxygen in the tears that coat the cornea.
Yeah.
Clear?
Okay. Yeah.
So this is air, this is fluid tears, and this is the cell or the outer surface of the cornea. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we will see this thing, facilitated diffusion. As you have learned, the phospholipid bilayer of a membrane are barrier to polar molecule and ions. Now, as we learned that the phospholipid bilayer of membrane are barriers to polar molecules and ions. So they will not allow each and every polar molecule or ion to move through it. However, membranes contain channel proteins through which the polar molecule and ion can pass. Now, this membrane contains channel protein also. Now, channel protein can pass polar molecules and ions. Now, diffusion across the membrane through protein channel is known as facilitated diffusion. Is that point clear?
Yeah.
Fine. Any doubt in this?
No.
Okay. So membrane with protein channels are selectively permeable as most protein channels are specific to one molecule or ion. Membranes with protein channels are selectively permeable as most protein channels are specific to one molecule or ion. Clear?
Yeah.
Any doubt up to this point?
No.
Okay. Now the facilitated diffusion can also involve carrier protein, that is the active transport, which change shape when a specific molecule binds. Now facilitated diffusion can also involve carrier proteins, which change shape when a specific molecule binds. In facilitated diffusion, the movement of molecule is down a concentration gradient and does not require external energy. Clear?
Yeah.
In facilitated diffusion, the movement of molecule is down a concentration gradient and does not require external energy. So there is no external energy is required for the transportation part. Whatever the energy is there, it can be done through this only. Now, rate of facilitated diffusion is dependent on temperature, concentration gradient, membrane surface area, and thickness. So these are the 4 points on which that rate depends, that rate of facilitated diffusion depends, but is also affected by the number of channel proteins present. The more the channel proteins, the higher is the rate of diffusion overall. So total, we can say that 5 things that can check the rate of facilitated diffusion increase. It is the temperature, concentration gradient, and membrane surface area. Okay, and thickness. But is also affected by the number of channel proteins present, the overall protein channel, the higher the rate of diffusion overall. Clear?
Yeah.
Any doubts?
No. No.
The chapter is finished. This thing you did in school? Investigation into the factors of the diffusion rate in model cells.
No, we haven't done that.
Okay, fine then. Okay, now do quickly these questions. The chapter is finished now. Just quickly do these questions.